Hey, happy Sunday, right? So we have been getting a ton of really good feedback, questions about lobbying, protesting, the video trainings. And I just want to start by saying I'm very happy that you guys are finding these videos very helpful. And I'm very happy that you feel really comfortable talking to us about a lot of topics that are uncomfortable having when you're a veteran with a disability. So what I want to go over today is just some Q&A for you guys, because a lot of the questions that we're getting that are coming in they're common for the whole community. They're thematic. So what we're going to go over is how to lobby, how to go over protesting when you have a disability, and things like that, because it is hard, right? So we're going to go over all of that today and just go over some of the questions that you guys have had. So one of the main things that we're getting a lot of questions on is um, or like statements combined with questions, is that you see your Congress members on the list, you want to reach out to them, but you have some kind of barrier because of the PTSD or other disabilities you have from experiencing military sexual trauma. So one of the really common questions that we're getting is like, if I reach out to my congressperson, I feel like I'm gonna get angry and yell at them. I will tell you that has happened to me a couple times when I was not on medication. So it happened. So like when those questions came in and we were talking about it, I was just like, yeah, like it's a reasonable concern. It's 100% reasonable concern, because like I'm not above it. I'm not, and like when I'm on medication and things like that, I'm much more functional. But like PTSD without medication, like when you're triggered, right? So we're gonna talk about how to navigate that, how we navigate that space during the next couple weeks, so you can be successful, because it's not always easy. So, how do you approach your congressman, or, you're doing lobbying efforts? One of the things that we have spoken about, and we've already started a roster. We're doing an effort tomorrow where we're supporting the veterans who have disabilities, and we're getting them their buddy, which we've already started doing to help them effectively lobby. So a couple of different things. If you feel that you would be extremely triggered by having a conversation, email is effective as well. However, you need to do a phone call to get an email, right? So if you feel that you're going to be very triggered in having that conversation with some of the steps that we went over, um, your best course of action is to have a lobbying battle buddy call with you. So someone, you could do friends, family, someone you're comfortable with, or if you don't have someone that would be supportive, we have volunteers who will be supported and that will help you. We already have a roster. We already have assignments done that we're taking care of. So if you have someone you're comfortable with that will help you through the process, make that decision. However, if you don't, we have the resources and the support system to help you through that. And we are doing, we have this effort going on over the next couple of days. So that is just for you to know on the lobbying piece, because when you do have emotions, they come out, right? When you have PTSD, when you're doing advocacy work and you have PTSD, like those feelings are going to come up. They're not going to not happen. So it would be highly optimistic and almost unrealistic to think that you would go through advocacy for MST when you've been through it without having any triggers at all. I think that would be highly unrealistic. So let's deal with the realistic terms, right? Is that you'll probably get triggered at some point. You'll probably have an adverse reaction or response at some point. And I understand that you feel concerned because you don't want to make the movement look bad, but like I told you, I'm not above disabilities, right? Like I've had more than enough moments myself having disabilities, having PTSD and the severity at which I have it. And like, yeah, and I've been judged for it. So like, I'm not going to turn around and judge you for having a disability response, right? Like, or a trigger response. What I would say that I expect from it is that, you know, that you have a level of self-awareness, that you know that it's happening and that you're not being violent in the process. So in terms of like phone calls and lobbying efforts, um, do I expect it to go perfectly? No. You know, do I expect there to be disability responses and triggers? Yes. If it is way too overwhelming for you and you are malfunctioning and you cannot function, immediately stop what you're doing. Do not proceed, right? Because that's not healthy for you. So if you're not at that level of functioning, you got to have a level of self-awareness to be like, this is not for me. I have to take a step back and I can't do this. Now, that does not mean that we can't raise your voice and amplify it. What we will do in that circumstance is you need to let us know, and we will find someone who is trained within the movement to be able to advocate on your behalf with your permission and your consent. And we will move the conversation forward for you. So that way your voice is still being heard, even if you can't move forward, right? We're a team and we're going to work together through this, and we're going to make sure that we all have our voices heard. So what we need from you is, if you know that that's going to happen, let us know. A number of you have already reached out to us and told us that you've been watching the videos and that they're helpful, but that you still have some concerns that, like, you know, your congressman's a man and that you think you're going to, you know, scream at him and yell at him because you struggle with that because you don't trust men, right? So like, we understand that. We're compassionate towards your disabilities. We're not here to judge you. Okay. We're not here to put you down because of that. We're here to lift you up, and we're here to help move your story forward. And we know how challenging that is. So, you know, we're welcoming you with open arms. And if you're having these challenges, communicate it with us and we will come up with a customized plan. And that's what we've been doing with you guys who have been coming directly to us. It's just that, like, the conversations are very thematic in nature, which means the patterns emerging that there's a lot of you who really want to get involved, but you're struggling because you're already triggered before moving forward. So it's necessary that I have this conversation with you so you know where we're coming from and where we're standing on the issue. And you know, these are issues that we have within our community. And you know, that's just part of when you're part of a community that is disabled, and then we're doing advocacy work related to our disabilities. These things are going to happen. It is nice that you guys are um, you're at a point of your self-awareness that you can tell us about this before it happens. I just want you to know that I don't expect a perfect ride. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's unrealistic to say that people who have disabilities doing advocacy work are going to sit there and be perfect 100% of the time, especially if there's a lack of training, especially if there's a lack of a support system. So what we're trying to do with these videos is give you the tools, the resources, and the support that you need so you can be equipped, and so we can figure out these problems before these situations happen, so we can best come up with solutions for you so you can be involved. And that's why I said, like, I understand that fear because I've been there, and like I've done a lot of the things you guys have questions about and concerns about. Like, I've yelled at my Congress people before. Like, I've done that. I've been at a protest and I have cursed people out. I cursed Donald Trump out. Like, it's happened. You know what I mean? So I can't sit there and, knowing that I have a disability, hold myself to an unrealistic standard and then say that you have to be held to an unrealistic standard, because it's not realistic, right? It's part of just living with PTSD, and that is what it's like to be a veteran with a disability. So on the lobbying side of these efforts, understand that we do have resources and support to offer you, and these resources are open and available, and if you need them, reach out to us and continue having the conversations just like many of you are doing. Just knowing that so many of you are reaching out, that tells me that there's more of you that probably haven't reached out that are feeling the same way. So I want to reiterate, it is okay to come to us. We're going to work it out. I also want to let you guys know that not only that we have that, but also that a lot of you have already gone forward with asking your congresspeople to co-sign. Like we already so far have had 50 people who already went forward with that action within 48 hours of us releasing the email to have your congresspeople co-sign. So a lot of you have gone forward with it. We still have another about 20, 30 of you who are struggling. And we've already worked out solutions for that. And we already have you on a roster, and we already have you guys ready to go. Within the next 48 hours, these things will be resolved. So, you know, we just want you to know that it's okay and that you have support, and it's okay to be yourself. I do, well, what I will say is, just given the time frame, like, if you're not on medication for PTSD, if you're not in therapy, if you're not managing it, I strongly recommend that you sign up to get a lobbying buddy to help you, a lobbying battle buddy, because when you're going through this process and you're like not in treatment and you're not on medication, it's ultra triggering, like ultra triggering, because you're facing your trauma in the process for change. So, you know, if you are in the category where like you're not in VA treatment, you're not in any treatment, you're not on, you know, SSRIs, medication, or any of that, I'm going to say this again. I strongly recommend that you get a lobbying battle buddy for that, because it's so triggering, like your brain will malfunction, you know, and that's just a reality of having PTSD. And I'm telling you this from firsthand experience of like my evolution. Like, being on medication and being in therapy makes a world of difference in functionality. So, you know, making sure that you're healthy and that you have support if you're not feeling healthy is very, very important. So I just want to make sure that you know, that all of you feel supported and that we're successful, right? Because taking these actions is about being effective. It's not about being perfect. It's not about making sure that every time you make a move that it's a perfect move. It's just, how do we communicate in a way that's effective to drive results, right? How do we entitle progress? How do we ensure that that happens? So if you're feeling like you need support, and your internal compass is like, I don't know if I can do this on my own, reach out to us. Reach out to us and we will work it out. The sooner you reach out to us, the better. So now that I covered the aspect of lobbying and what's going on with like the co-signing and, you know, how we're doing the lobbying efforts, there's other questions that came in from you, who a lot of you are getting involved in protests, and you've had questions about that. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So I have led many protests. I have participated in many protests. And the first thing that I will tell you is, you don't ever know how they're going to fully go. And the reason why I'm saying that is, majority of the time they're peaceful. Majority of the time they're empowering, majority of the time. However, there are times that they can become hostile. There are times that they can become aggressive. There are times that they can become violent. So navigating that space is also difficult. So there's a couple other things that I would definitely tell you in the course of like going through that myself. Um, I'm a firm believer that like protests are the best way to share your emotions authentically, right? Like, you can have your PTSD, scream and shout, get it all out at a protest, because that is the avenue and the venue within your First Amendment rights that allow you to do so, right? And you're not like yelling at a particular person, you're like yelling at the institution. So it's a little bit different than you go into your congressman's office and you're like, fuck you, bro. And then like being like, fuck everybody, you know, who's not supporting MST. Like it's more socially acceptable at a protest. So for people who do have PTSD, who want to let their anger out, like, and your fight instincts come out, it really is a good experience for you fighting in that aspect, because like you're cultivating change. You just have to make healthy choices along the way, and sometimes that's not always the easiest. So, you know, like I said, scream, shout, get it all out. You know, I'm um an advocate for that saying and for doing that, right? Like there's chant if you're going to chant, express yourself, express your feelings. It is okay to do that at a protest. It is not okay to get violent at a protest, right? So when you have PTSD and your fight instinct is going off, there are skills that are necessary at the same time. Because while you're fighting and you're protesting and you're marching, it feels good to let your anger out, especially if you're someone who has a really strong fight instinct. Like it's the perfect arena to really let your feelings out. You know, being with your sign, marching, saying what you got to say, and like feeling heard. Um, those aspects are good. You know, those aspects are fun, because you feel like you get to be yourself and you don't feel awkward having PTSD. Now, let's go over into violence, because violence can erupt. Protests can become hostile. The thing is, like, no matter what you do, you can't control every single thing that happens with every other person. You can't control if counter protesters come up. You can't control every single thing. It's just impossible being a human, but you can mitigate risk, and you can mitigate risk with your own actions. So when you're protesting, um, I like to think of it as like, look at your options on the table, right? There's your fight instinct, your flight instinct, your freeze instinct, your hide instinct, and your de-escalate instinct. So like there's 5 options on the table when you're at a protest on how to respond. And when you're at a protest, fighting, like physically fighting, is not what you want to do. Like you don't want to end up in jail. I know having PTSD though, like when you are letting your instincts come out, sometimes like you want to take your balls to the wall. That's not okay, and you don't want to do that, right? So there are some skills required just to function properly when you have PTSD. One of the things that I would definitely tell you is if you're on an anti-anxiety for your PTSD, take it before the protest. Definitely take it before the protest, because sometimes you'll get social anxiety, like being around that many people. And then also if there's counter protesters and people like screaming and stuff, or like people coming up to you getting aggressive, it can make you want to punch them in the face. And if you have PTSD, like take your medication, take your medication. And if you're going to be at a protest all day, bring your medication with you, and make sure you have it, because if you're you know, everyone's on like different anti-anxieties, but if you have one that only lasts like 4 hours and you're going to be there for 8 hours, like that's the other thing. You don't know how long you're going to be at the protest. So make sure you have some medication with you, because it can get so emotionally stimulating that your fight or flight goes off, and then your judgment function just malfunctions. And then at that point, like you end up in a fight, and that's not what you wanted. So, you know, prepare any medications that you have to take in advance. Also, before you go to a protest, I highly recommend doing meditation. It's something I practice every single time before going to a protest. And that just helps you set your mindset to be healthy and calm before you go. So I do that for 20 minutes before any protest that I attend, to make sure that I'm in a place where like I feel safe, I feel healthy, and I'm making good choices. So medication and meditation, great combination before a protest. Um, Also, when you are engaging in the protest, and like let's say you do see counter protesters who get violent, um, first thing to do is if you see it erupting or you see people with weapons, because sometimes you'll see people who have weapons at protests from a distance, and you're just gonna go the other way. Like you're gonna get far away from that person. Like if you catch that, because that's happened to me. Like I've seen people with like batons and stuff and guns, and like I'm like, okay, I'm not going near you. You know what I mean? So like things like that, keep in mind. So you're moving away from them. So that way, if an altercation breaks out, you're not part of it. Also, if you're in an area where a fight erupts, generally like that's happened to me also. I like just try to like move my way back and around. and get out the situation. Like, I don't like to be in that, because once my fight instinct goes off, it doesn't stop. Like, it's balls to the walls at that point. So try to like move away. Sometimes you're gonna have an aggressor come up to you. That has happened to me. And what I would recommend at that point is that you're moving backwards in your body language while you're having this conversation with this person. And so like you're not forward aggressing with them while they're aggressive, because you want to de-escalate. So if somebody's coming up in your face and they're like, why are you here? Why are you supporting this trash? Blah, 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 whatever. Like, because just it happens. Make sure that like you're just backing up. Don't match their tone. You can put your body language while you're moving back and just be like, look, you're asserting your First Amendment. I'm asserting my First Amendment. I'm here to be peaceful, and I hope you are too. Continue moving away. If none of that is possible, like the de-escalation, the moving out the situation, the getting away, or like the hiding far away from these people who are violent. If it gets to a point that like a fight breaks out and you're in the middle of it and someone's like pulling your hair and that happens, then you have to fight, right? Like there's no choice in that. But you don't have to be the first person to fight, and you don't have to be an aggressor in the fight, and you don't have to keep going that's causing a fight. So like I've told you guys before, like I practice quantum activism, and like the cardinal sin in quantum activism is being the initiator of violence. Like you can be a defender and protect yourself if violence happens, but being the initiator of violence is like the cardinal sin against like another human or nature or anything. To incite violence is like an absolute no-no. So, and it was great for me to really take that on as a value as someone who has PTSD, because like the threat of violence, like someone would raise their voice and I'd be like, like I'm about to fight you. So it was like one of those things that like really taking that on as a value and learning that was like really helpful in my functioning capacity, and living out those values has been really helpful. So just like if you're in a fight and you have to defend yourself, that's different, but you don't have to initiate, and you don't have to instigate, and you don't have to provoke a fight or violence at a protest. So think about all of the different options you have, right? You can freeze and stop what you're doing. You can walk away. You can run away. You can hide in another area until the violence passes. Like there's so many options. You can use de-escalation. You'll figure all that out depending on the situation. But like fighting should only happen if like you're in the middle of it and like you don't have another choice because like you're in it. But there's a lot of ways to avoid it. And then also too, if you see people that are about to start fighting, like you probably don't want to yell right in their face. So like walk away, get some distance, and then maybe you want to yell from a safe spot so you can let your feelings out without continuing a fight to happen. The other thing is like protests in and of themselves, they're triggering. There's no way like you have PTSD, you're going into an environment that's designed for you to fight, that's designed for you to speak about your trauma, and then like you're out there fighting, like it's triggering. It is triggering. And like that's what happens if you're particularly doing a protest related to MST. Like when I did the women's march, I was like, the anxiety was crippling. And the fact that like I did so well that day, I was like, thank God, like this higher vessel entered my body and let that happen, because the severity of my disability versus what manifested that day, I was like, that's a miracle. That's a miracle that happens. Because I don't even know how I did that. And then also like I've been to protests where like straight violence erupted at a rally for Black Lives. And the reality is like you can see the trauma of the Black community too, and what violence looks like against them, and what they deal with. And when you're going through like experiences like that too, it is traumatizing. So, just think about being safe in what you're doing. And if you're someone who's easily triggered, have your medication. It's helpful. Do your meditation before you go. It's helpful. Bring someone with you. Don't go alone. Make sure there's people that that are supportive. And also make sure you have an exit strategy. Like if things are erupting and like a full-blown riot is erupting, have an exit plan. I've had to do that before, so make sure that you're doing that too, so you're safe. Those are all things you can do. So like, don't think of civic engagement of like, I have a disability, I can't get engaged. You know what I mean? Because like some of you are having struggles with that where you're like, I want to do this, but I'm disabled. Like I'm doing it and I'm disabled. So I'm not above you. I'm not different than you. I am a you. So I know that you can do it. It's just I have had myself a lot of fuck ups along the way because nobody ever like talks about all this. Like people don't talk about what it is to be a disabled veteran and then doing advocacy work related to your disability and then where you are on your healing spectrum or not. Like no one has these conversations. So like I have had every fuck up and faux pas possible when I went through these experiences. And that's why I'm happy to share this with you, you know? It's just not going to be a perfect road. And like and sometimes too even when you like scream at a protest or you yell like people on the internet will tell you about it forever. It's like they'll bring up the time that you yelled at a protest. Like when I was at the Commandant's house, people were still like, I can't believe you were yelling. And I was like, you have no idea what I was going through. Like you have no idea. Like that's PTSD. Like that is PTSD. Like I was raped in the Marine Corps, you know, I was starved, I was hazed, I went through sleep deprivation. You know, I was like, I was thrown in jail. Like, you don't think that I was at the Commandant's house going through flashbacks. And like the reality of it is like that's not going to stop me from protesting. You know, like yeah, I'm having an episode, but like I'm not going to not get involved in advocacy. You know, like I'm not going to get deterred from that because I have a disability. But what I will tell you is like in my experience, a ton of people have made fun of me for it. A ton of people have mocked me for it. A ton of people have said really cruel things about it when it's obvious that I'm having a PTSD relapse. And what I'm trying to say is like I'm still going forward. You know what I mean? No matter what anyone has ever said, that has not stopped me with advocacy work. And the reality of it is like what I took, what I've learned, and I was like, huh, maybe I need to readjust medication. Maybe I need more therapy. And I went and spoke to my doctors about everything that I was going through. And my doctors were like, that's actually normal. Like, given what you've been through and given that you're leading a protest there, like, this is a normal feeling and course of action that you took. And also, like, the reason I got escalated at that point was like the Marine Corps was trying to get me arrested. And like, at first, before I even got like that, I was sitting peacefully on a sidewalk. And then they called the cops on me. And then the cops were trying to arrest me. They took out like these wire, I forgot what you call them. They're not handcuffs, but they put them on protesters all the time. They took that out and told me they were going to arrest me. And I was still calm. And I was like, I'm sitting on a sidewalk, asserting my First Amendment rights in Washington, D.C., on this public property, and they're going to tell me you're going to arrest me. Like, I'm asserting my First Amendment rights. Then they brought a First Amendment rights officer, and then the Marine Corps still was like starting shit. So at that point, I was so frustrated and so triggered that I was like, you're the military and you're supposed to uphold people's rights. And at the same time, you're disenfranchising my rights and you're supposed to uphold freedom, but you're not. And I'm someone who's been disenfranchised by the Marine Corps. So, and thank you for that because I had no idea that's what they were called. But what I'm saying is like, when you protest, like there's not going to be perfection all the time. Like that's just how that works. So what you just want to keep in mind is be safe. Think about what keeps you safe. Express your emotions authentically. Like that is the point of a protest. I don't personally agree with rioting. I don't personally agree with violence. Like I don't engage in any of that because it's not good for me and it's not good for anyone else. So, you know, if you feel that you're going to protest and you're going to curse people out, I think you could still go to a protest and you'll be okay. If you feel like you're going to go to a protest and get so triggered, you're going to start like punching people out, then maybe you're not ready to go to a protest. Talk to your doctor first. You know, talk to your doctor about how you can engage in a protest and be safe while you're engaging in the protest. So, you know, don't think because you have a disability that you can't do things. You can still do things. It's just you're going to manage it differently. And, you know, you're going to have your disability is going to manifest. You know, and if you're not in the public eye, you don't really have to worry about it unless you do something that like hits the news. But If you're in the public eye, then yeah, you know, there's going to be criticism that just comes with having a disability. Like, people are not nice when people have disabilities and have responses out of disabilities. Like, people expect you to be perfect 100% of the time. And the reality is, like, when you're disabled, that's just not realistic. Like, when your disability is PTSD and then it's due to MST and you're doing advocacy work, perfection's not realistic. So give your best, you know, manage what you can, talk to your doctor about it, you know, talk to them about taking anti-anxieties. Maybe they'll tell you to take a higher dose that day. Like, have these conversations before you do it. Like, do protest preparation, especially if it's your first time, so you're having a good experience. You know, have an exit plan of, like, if things don't go right, where am I going to go? How am I going to get out of the situation? When is it time for me to go home so I'm not beating people up and getting into fights and getting arrested? So, like, just think about all of those different aspects because they can happen. Also, like, I have brought my nephew to a march before because some of you are like, should I bring kids? Here's the thing, like, protesting, I haven't brought my nephew unless it was like a really small group and it was a small protest, and I knew, like, the people that were going. But if there's a counter protest that's going on, I don't recommend it. If it's a huge protest going on, I don't recommend it. If it's like a march for like a cause or like the women's march, like, yeah, I'll bring my nephew and let him experience politics. But if it's like a high tense or high um outcome that the protests might become aggressive, then I don't recommend bringing children. But I do recommend making sure you bring a buddy and somebody that can help you with the strategies that we discussed and that are going to, you know, hold you accountable. Make sure you took your medication, make sure you spoke to your doctor, and, you know, that, you know, bring your medication with you, like someone who's going to be there with you to help you through the experience, because it's hard. Also, some of you have asked about public speaking and getting triggered during public speaking. That happens too. So getting into public speaking, when you're telling your story, it is hard. It is extremely difficult. And the farther and wider your story goes, not everyone's nice. And that's also triggering. People will be like, you didn't really get raped. That never really happened. You're lying about that. You're making the Marine Corps look bad. You're making the military look bad. You're just doing this for the purposes to get attention. You're just doing this so people feel sorry for you. Like, that happens, and it's not men. It's not only men. Women do it too. Like, they jump on the propaganda train and they'll act like they're supportive and they will come out and start attacking you. Like, it's so insanely cruel that people are like that, especially when you're like, okay, like, no, this shit's documented. Like, I've been in treatment for it. Like, I've been in treatment for a while for this shit and it impacts my life. Like, it's deeply painful, but it happens. And the reality is, like, once you go public with your story, you cannot decide the attention you get. You cannot pick between good and bad and neutral attention. What's going to happen is when your story gets out there, if it's attracting people, it's going to attract attention, period. Sometimes you'll have more support, sometimes you won't. But the more unique your story is and the more you're the first person to tell your story in your area, you're gonna deal with hate, especially from groups of people that are not supportive or people that uphold rape culture. Also, you're gonna start seeing that a lot of people uphold rape culture. So it's not easy to tell your story. What you're gonna what you're gonna need is a good self-care routine. You're gonna have to know what your limits are. And also, like, don't hang out on social media, especially if people are like saying stuff, because it's gonna just turn your fight instinct on so much. So, like, you do what you have to do in the course of your advocacy. You know what is true to yourself. You know what for you, you know your experience. You know how it's impacted you. You know how your life has been impacted. You stay true to yourself, regardless of what anybody has to say about you. And you keep moving forward. And you keep fighting for advocacy, because at the end of the day, those people are naysayers and they're full of propaganda, right? And they're trying to silence you. So you keep raising your voice, you keep amplifying your voice, and you don't let those people affect you. And when you see that it's affecting you, you disconnect and you take time for yourself. you rejuvenate, and you go back to what your internal motivation is for doing it. Because the reality is there's going to be plenty of time that you're going to want to give up. There's going to be experiences that are going to make you be like, fuck this, it's not worth it. So, you know, it's hard. It's hard when you're disabled and you're trying to communicate that you have a disability and that there needs to be change, you know? So just ensure like you're doing this because this generation, our generation has already been fucked. The generation before us has been fucked. So, you know, we have to raise our voices to ensure that the next generation's protected, right? They deserve to be protected. No one else needs to go through the experiences that we did. So for people that are, you know, coming at you or that are negative, let it go. Like let them live in their cycle of negativity and let them be weak in their corner. But you don't have to let them weaken you. So when you tell your story, you tell your story as authentically as possible. You come forward and you raise your voice, you amplify your voice, and you know that you're doing this for the next generation of young people. And that's what you have to keep in mind. And that's what you go back to when you want to give up. And, you know, you also have to know your internal strength and what you know you can handle. And if it's becoming too hard and you're suffering in doing this, you need to talk to your doctor about it. And if it's at a point that you can't handle it, then you either need to readjust your treatment if you want to go forward, or you need to cease what you're doing and take a step back, right? So that's just some of the common themes that have come up in the last couple of days that you guys have had questions about that I wanted to answer as part of Q&A. So you have that information going into this week as you guys are doing your different activities. But if you need anything else, just reach out to us and, you know, we'll help you navigate your individual situations. And I'm going to let you all go. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.